So, if you were to ask this question, someone said to you, are emotions helpful?
When I swear at people, they are.
Oh, when you swear? You're not a girl.
Not me.
Okay. You know, when you think of it, are your emotions helpful? You know, are they just trouble? You know, me raised as a child, I was told that they were not very helpful. And that they were this thing that just made your life difficult. And you weren't to feel, and you weren't to trouble people with your emotions. You know, you're just supposed to listen, be good, and be happy. Just be happy all the time. Okay? And I found that difficult, and I'm sure a lot of us do. Just understanding the purpose behind our emotions. So, what are their purpose? Well, emotions can be helpful if we understand their purpose and what they're trying to teach us and what we're supposed to do with them. Okay? Emotions have, they teach us a great understanding of how we see the world and how we need to respond to it. Okay? Emotions are a signal of perceived imbalance. Okay? That means that it all has to do with our perception and how we see the world. You know, people think that there's only one world that we live on. But in reality, there's over 7 billion worlds on this planet. And each world is different. Your world's different, your world's different, my world's different. It all depends on how we were raised, how we perceive the world, our experiences, what media we look at, what our religion is, what our experiences are in the world. And that determines our perception of how we see everything that happens. You may be at one experience and you may see a post on Facebook, let's say. Here's a really good example. And you might be like, hell yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to like it. I'm going to share it. And then all of a sudden you get a comment 20 seconds later from your friend. I can't believe you reposted that. How dare you? Why do you think that? Why do you support that? That's terrible. Has that ever happened to anyone? Everyone's afraid to put their hands up. I'm sure it happens a lot. We're getting so divisive over our perceptions of the world. And when it comes to our emotions, okay, our emotions tell us a lot about how we're interpreting our world and our experience right now. So when you feel anger is always caused by injustice, or when you feel something is unfair. So every time you feel anger, it is your body and your mind expressing to you, you think something's unfair. Something's happened. Someone said something or somebody did something. But if we don't understand that connection, if we don't understand that that's a signal showing us that there's an imbalance in our lives, we're just angry. And we don't know why. Anyone ever had that? We're just angry all of a sudden, but you don't know why. You know, something was said or something happened or you saw something and it triggers this emotion. And when we don't have that connect with our emotions, if we don't understand the root, we just become emotional. And we react to our emotions rather than responding to them. Okay? I always tell a lot of my patients, I say, the world has enough nuclear reactors in this world. Anyone know anyone that just reacts all the time? Okay? We want to be first responders. People that when something happens in our life, we can take a breath and respond to what's happening based off what we believe, what we understand, who we want to be, rather than just reacting and mirroring everything that happens in our lives. That's when life gets hairy and scary and difficult, when you're just reacting and being emotional off everything that comes up, rather than, oh, well, why do I feel this way? Why am I triggered by what they said or what they posted or what I read? If we can understand that, then we can help save ourselves from our emotions rather than just reacting to them all the time. So we got this little cutie here. Okay, what emotion do you think he's expressing?
Anger.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Okay. You're the closest with fatigue. We're going to talk about that. Okay? So, are we born with emotions? Are emotions part of our DNA? Are we born with a set of emotions built into us and into our brains? Okay? What's interesting is science used to believe that. Science used to believe that we're all born with the same set of emotions and that we all experience them the same way. And doesn't matter from which culture to other culture, which part of the earth, where you were raised, what race, everyone felt the same emotions. And the science and the sociology behind it is very interesting because the researcher, they decided, okay, these are the main emotions, and they took pictures of people expressing these emotions. Of course, they were white people, okay? And they took these pictures of these white researchers, and they traveled the world, and they asked people, okay, what emotion is this? And, oddly enough, all the Western places they visited knew these emotions. But then if they went to cultures that didn't quite understand that emotion, they would sit down and they would teach them these emotions, and then ask them, what emotion is this? So they could get the results they wanted. And then if there was cultures that just didn't quite understand some of these emotions because they didn't have anger in their culture or they didn't have sadness in their culture. And what's fascinating is within the last 100 years, there was cultures on this earth that didn't have some of the main emotions. And so they were asking, so when they went back and checked this research, because when they published it, they removed a lot of these countries from the research to get it to fit the ideal and the idea they wanted. And so from that came all these little baby books and the training in the schools to teach all the kindergarten kids, these are the emotions, and this is how you react to them. And this has gone on for over 100 years now, where we all believe this is what emotions are. Okay? Now, the new research tells us something different. What do you think these emotions are?
I'm hungry and I'm fed.
Okay, we're getting closer to what we're talking about here. What's interesting is the researchers now believe the way our emotions are, they're not inborn, they're not genetic. All emotions are learned. Meaning that when we were born, babies aren't emotional. They are uncomfortable and comfortable. That's it. So when we see a baby with a smile, we think, oh, look at that happy baby. But that's our perception. We're labeling our ideas and our perception on that child, and now we're teaching them, oh, who's the happy baby? Right? Or we see this one and we think, look at that grumpy little sod. Okay? And we're like, oh, who's the grumpy baby? Okay? And then we're teaching them, all right, that emotion's grumpy. What you're feeling is grumpy. But the research shows now is that as babies are born, they're either comfortable or uncomfortable. And they may show those feelings, that comfort level in different ways. So if a child is really uncomfortable, they're going to scream and yell. If a child is really happy and comfortable, they're going to coo and they're going to giggle and they're going to smile. Okay? But they're not emotional. Emotions are things that we're teaching to kids. And what's interesting is as they learn these emotions, what the research finds is those that have a greater gradient of emotion are the happiest people on the planet. Meaning that and what's interesting is some people, they just have one or two emotions, right? Does anyone know anyone like that? They're either content or pissed off, or they're happy or they're sad. And more often than not, they're either I'm surviving or I'm depressed. Okay? And when people have very short and very small gradients of emotion, that's when things get really stuck and difficult for them. Because if we have only one or two or three states of emotion, then we only have those places to go when life gets difficult. And so we're either on or off. We're either happy or unhappy. And how frustrating it is to always think, oh, I'm not happy, so life sucks. Okay? Now, what the research shows is some people have a great much more diverse gradient of emotion that goes anywhere from depression to I'm feeling a bit grumpy to I'm a bit melancholy, I'm fatigued mentally, to I'm just a little off, I need a nap, to I'm okay. And in some cultures, there are names for every emotion along that gradient, okay? The 50 shades of happy, the 50 shades of grumpy, the 50 shades of anger. And these gradients help people, instead of being, completely happy to completely sad, they can reassess where they're feeling every day. And as they move along that gradient, then they're not punishing themselves for not being happy all the time, or not punishing themselves internally for being depressed all the time. And so, yeah, acupuncture helps. So we want to be able to move along that gradient to find that balance and to find that spot that's going to work best for us. Okay? So we are taught as we age in many ways. We're either taught by our parents, and some parents have pretty good modeling for emotions, some don't. Okay? Some of us get a lot of our emotional modeling, whether it's school or at church or on social media or on videos and so on. And if we're relying on the world and media to teach our children and grandchildren and each other our emotional gradients, we're in a lot of trouble, right? It's interesting. You just look at Facebook and, it used to be that you could like or unlike someone's post, right? So the emotional gradient was 2 emotions. Love it or hate it. Okay? Now we've got 5 or 6. So social media is at least teaching us that there's more than 2 emotions. So we're getting a little bit better. But if we're relying on these methods to teach us what our emotions are about and what they're there for, we're going to have some difficulty. Because what's the majority emotions on the news? Well, fear, want, envy, all these, anger. It's not always the most positive emotions, because on the news it's not a lot of positive stuff. In Facebook, it's not really reliable for a lot of our emotions and what things should be. So we really have to work on ourselves and through our families to learn and to teach ourselves a little bit more balance within our emotions and what they're for. So some of us, unfortunately, get some really bad modeling of our emotions, or we have traumatic experiences. Okay? What I'm grateful for nowadays is, I'm sure, how many people here grew up with parents that used more than their words to teach and discipline their children? Okay? All right. I was talking to my kids about this. So just for the video, that's just about everyone in the room. Okay? I remember as a young child, and I don't know if anyone else remembers this, I grew up in the northeast in Calgary, in Marlborough, in the hood. And I remember, at that point in elementary school, teachers were allowed to hit you. No question, they could hit you, and they couldn't get any trouble. And I was the little Hulk at the beginning that I got hit lots. And I remember one day I was going home from school, and we were all sent home this letter. And I was a nosy kid, so I read the letter that I was supposed to give to my parents. And on this letter, it stated that the Ministry of Education in Alberta had passed legislation now that teachers were no longer allowed to hit students without the permission of their parents. And so this was a permission slip that I was supposed to take home to my parents, and if they wanted teachers to still hit me, they had to sign it, and I would bring it back to school the next day. Needless to say, I tore up that piece of paper and threw it out. But it just blows me away that even within that short period of time, it was still acceptable for even within schools for teachers to hit kids and kids to get hit at home. And that modeling teaches us just a few things, right? That if you don't behave, you get hit. And when you're older, if you don't like what someone does, you can hit them. And you can hit your kids. And whether you feel that's right or wrong, it's not important. It's what it teaches and what it models. It tells us that if you're not being hit, you're behaving. And if you're not behaving, you're getting hit. So again, it teaches us two options on the gradient scale of emotions. And so there's not a lot of options along that. So whether it's right or wrong, our focus now is, can we communicate differently? Can we teach more emotions? Can we use emotions to help children understand how they're feeling and then get them to respond in a healthy way so they don't become emotional and aggressive and difficult? And it can happen. It's possible. Okay? From my own experience, I have 2 autistic sons. And so raising kids with autism, it's a little difficult. They don't behave and listen like other kids. So you have to adjust and you have to do things differently. So part of my experience and through this was learning that and working with them to be able to teach and help them understand emotions that they don't even understand. Because autistic kids, their gradient for emotion is almost 0 because they're just comfortable or uncomfortable. They don't understand emotions. They don't pick up on them like other people do. So I had to teach them and help them understand that gradient and understand where to be on it. And luckily I was able to do it without the whip or the scream. Okay? But if we have experiences with trauma as young kids, okay, then that trauma affects us not only emotionally but physically. One big thing within Chinese medicine that I discovered reading that book that one day is how our emotions are connected to particular organs and meridian systems in the body. And when we repress those emotions, it has negative effects on us physically. And when we express too much of those emotions, it also has a negative effect on us physically. And that our emotions are not something that we need to stay in and, feed off of. They're just a signal. And when we receive that signal, if we know what it's trying to tell us, we can act on it, we can do something and get in balance again. If we don't understand it, we're stuck and we become beings of emotion. And we're subject and we are slaves to those emotions. And one thing that I am blown away with in my practice is not only how much abuse is out there that have happened to people over the years, but that how well people are at hiding that abuse and bearing that abuse and that trauma. And it affects them in many ways throughout their lives, and they don't really understand the connection. But because of the diagnostic tools and the understanding we have within Chinese medicine, we know from their symptoms how they're related to certain emotions. So we can see the effect these emotions, whether repressed or expressed, are affecting their bodies, and we can see where the imbalances are, but they haven't made the connection yet. And it's very interesting how it holds them back in their lives.